We've come to our Friday feature now, Movie Spotlight, where our film critics give us their recommendations on what to watch over the weekend among the latest releases here in Korea. Let's bring them in now. First, we have with us Jason and Bechervaise. Jason, hello. It's great to see you.
Yeah, great to be back.
And we also have with us Darcy Paquet as well. Darcy, hello to you too.
Hi.
Okay, so we have one local and one international release to look at this week. And we start with the local release, as usual. And actually, it's not a new release as such. It is the re-release of a Korean blockbuster classic, Shiri, the landmark smash hit from the late 1990s. It's back in the theatres with a sparkling 4K refresh. Jason, this is your pick this week. Can you tell us more about it? As I said, it's a landmark film in many ways, right?
Yeah, it is indeed. In many respects, it marked the beginning of a new era for the Korean film industry. Blockbusters have become central in the growth of the film industry, particularly in the 2000s, but even more so in the 2010s. That's less the case now, and if there's time we can talk a bit about that. It's directed by Kang Jae-gyu, who also helmed the blockbuster Taegukgi, and it stars Kim Yoon-jin, Han Seok-gyu, Song Kang-ho, and Chae Min-sik, so a big cast. By today's standards, and then also, an A-list cast, obviously Song Kang-ho was kind of a rising star in the late 1990s, and Han Seok-gyu was one of the biggest stars of the day. And Han Seok-gyu and Song Kang-ho play these South Korean agents. They're in pursuit of this North Korean assassin, played by Kim Yoon-jin. And she's part of this terrorist group led by Chae Min-sik's character, who are basically trying to derail the progress in terms of the relationship between the two Koreas. And, many audiences, of course, will remember the football game at the end of the film, that climatic action set piece. And, during that set piece, the terrorists in the film are trying to detonate this explosive, this liquid explosive, what's called CTX. And you got these senior officials from North and South Korea attending that game. The film sold 2.2 million tickets nationwide. Record-breaking success with
6.2.
6.2 million tickets nationwide with 2.4 million viewers in Seoul, and that actually surpassed the number of Titanic. So it was dubbed by the local press. Shiri was a small fish that sunk Titanic. And of course, Shiri refers to a small fish that's in the movie, and so it's now back in screens. 4K. The remastering, although that actually happened a few years ago. I was lucky to be able to see it back on the big screen.
Right, it was a huge hit, drawing lots of people to the cinema. Yeah. But beyond that as well, how significant was this film? Because you said it marked the beginning of a new era for the Korean film industry. Indeed. But what is it about this particular film that changed the industry? Yeah,
it's blockbusters, right? So, Korean directors have been quite savvy at taking some of the characteristics of Hollywood movies or Hollywood blockbusters, spectacle, big budgets, A-list stars, and kind of repackaging it for local Korean audiences, often using, backdrops. So here, obviously, we have the inter-Korean relations, and it's also significant for how it depicts North Korean characters in the film, although here they are terrorists, but we do feel some sympathy towards them. There's that famous kind of, and Darcy actually talks about this in his wonderful book. Some of the lines that the character played by Chae Min-sik, he talks about. How would you understand? Live in South Korea, eating hamburgers and Coke, whilst in North Korea people are dying. So so it's significant in that sense. And obviously the influences of America, like I said, but it's not just Hollywood films, it's also Hong Kong movies from the 80s, and kind of bringing that all together and being an event film, releasing it on lots of screens at the same time, and so beating Hollywood at its own game. There were blockbusters that came before Shiri, but Shiri was ultimately the first, successful one.
And very briefly, why release the film now?
Well, that's a good question. Maybe Darcy has some idea about why releasing it is now. But I was scratching my head because it says at the beginning of the film, it says that it was remastered in 2019. And actually, there were two different versions. I didn't know that either. There's an international version, domestic version. They remastered domestic version. And I suppose maybe during the pandemic they were going to release it and decided not to.
Right, because it was released in 1999, so it's a 26-year anniversary. It's an odd number.
Yeah, so maybe they were thinking of doing it for some kind of anniversary. Maybe the 20... No, but
last year would have made sense.
Well, yeah, 25th year. Yeah. But I don't know. I don't know. There's not a lot going. There's not a lot out at the moment. Maybe that's what it is.
Okay.
But I went to see it with. Clearly it was a busy screen. I had a really bad seat because I booked the ticket late. But I didn't care because I got to see it on the big screen nonetheless. That's something I haven't been able to do.
Right. And what did you make of it? Does it hold up now, 26 years later?
Yes and no. I mean, the 4K actually kind of... it highlights what it does well, and it also highlights what it doesn't do well. What do you mean? Well, the sequence at the end of the film with the stadium, the football stadium, actually that's really impressive. I think that really comes out. It comes out quite well in 4K. I mean, it doesn't seem that dated. But on the other hand, the first half of the film, there's just all these set pieces, but it doesn't have much in the way of plot development. And, it seemed, it's a little bit sloppy. And the editing's terrible in places. And so the sequences themselves, some of them are really well put together, but then it would just kind of jump from one place to another. And then the music would suddenly just be, the volume would be turned down, and it just comes across as really uneven. And so the 4K version kind of highlights some of the issues with the film in that sense, and so in that way it does feel dated. So in some respects it doesn't, in other respects it does feel dated, but I enjoyed the experience, and the viewers with that they're in the screen with me clearly were as well. They were taking pictures as the credits went up, and I joined them, and it was obviously they understand the significance of the film, even though there are some problems with it.
Darcy, what about you? Did you get to see it in the 4K remastering? What did you make of it?
I wasn't able to go this week, but I've rewatched it a couple times over the years, and I'm old enough so that I saw it in the theater during its original release back in 1999. It was 2 years after I came to Korea. And I still kind of remember that because, at the time I was preparing to start this website on Korean cinema, and I was following the local film industry, but, I don't want to use the word inferiority complex, but the local industry just didn't see themselves in any way on the same plane as Hollywood.
Right.
And, Kang Jae-gyu came out and had this press conference before the film was released and said, I'm making a Korean blockbuster. And even using the word blockbuster is kind of it's like, who do you think you are comparing yourself to Hollywood? And, the film did so much better than anybody ever imagined. Sort of like with Parasite a few years ago, it was sort of like, a Korean film is able to actually do this, and it didn't only do well in Korea, but it did well in Hong Kong, and it did well in Japan, and that had never happened before. And so I think that it really kind of, more so even than the film itself. The film, it looked more glossy. Compared to today, it looks more primitive, but, at the time it felt like a step up in terms of its technical quality and everything else. But I think more than anything else, it gave the industry kind of a boost of confidence and maybe we can make big films. Maybe we can compete with Hollywood.
Yeah.
Right, so perhaps it is a film of its time, but it does have its place in history, and it is quite great to see it back in cinemas, I think, just so people can respect it again. A big bout of nostalgia for local audiences as well. Yeah,
and with Song Kang-ho and Jae Min-sik and Kim Yoon-jin and all these stars that were not nearly as famous at the time they appeared in this film.
Yeah, I'm sure audiences here will get a kick out of watching them when they were a bit younger. Yeah. Okay, once again, it's called Shiri. It's out now in cinemas here in Korea once again. Next, we have a new release, an international feature this time, by the well-known American director Steven Soderberg. It's called Black Bag. It has the same title in Korean as well. And it's a spy thriller set in London, starring Michael Fassbender and Cate Blanchett. Darcy, this is your pick. What can you tell us about it?
Yeah, Steven Soderberg is incredibly prolific. He makes sometimes low-budget experimental films, sometimes big budget films like Ocean's 11 or Erin Brockovich. I mean, this is kind of a smart genre movie. I mean, one of my favorite kind of movies, actually, a spy thriller with great dialogue and not a lot of spectacle, but a well-written screenplay and really good acting. And it opened in the US just a week ago, and so it's nice. A lot of these kind of mid-tier Hollywood films, we have to wait a year or two before we finally get to see them here. But yeah, it's very brand new.
Yes, and it's here. So Soderberg, also famous, of course, for constantly retiring, only to come back the next year or the next month even. Okay, so what is Black Bag actually about?
So it is pretty complicated, but basically Michael Fassbender and Cate Blanchett are two of the top intelligence officials in Great Britain, intelligence agents. They also happen to be married to each other. And I mean, their relationship seems to work quite well. They're these ultra professionals who have a lot of secrets to keep. They talk to each other about their work, but every so often they say, oh, that's black bag, meaning, this is information that I've had to put in a place where, I can't talk about it. And that's where the title comes from. But at the beginning of the film, Michael Fassbender's character learns that there's a mole inside the agency. They've narrowed it down to 5 possible people. And among those people is his wife. And so, his trust, his marriage is tested. He invites the 5 to dinner, and it kind of starts from there.
Okay, so it's almost a little Mr. and Mrs. Smith then. What did you make of it? How do you rate the film?
I mean, I enjoyed it a lot. I think that it has a lot of interesting characters. It has good dialogue. It kind of jumps along, and you have to really concentrate to keep up. And I mean, sometimes it runs a little bit ahead of you. And so, I mean, that could be frustrating, I suppose. But if you just kind of let it go and go with it, then I think that, the film has a lot of, there's a lot of fun to be had in watching it and to seeing these characters. And one of my favorite things is just to have a film that has such great dialogue and back and forth. And so it doesn't need a lot of spectacle. Just, putting these people in a room together and having them talk to each other, I think, makes it quite exciting.
Right, so you're saying audiences shouldn't expect major set pieces like Shiri or anything like that, then you're saying?
Yeah, not quite.
Okay.
Not there. Yeah.
Well, okay, I see Jason shaking his head. What did you make of it?
Oh, I loved it. It's great. And for the same reasons as Darcy said. I mean, actually, not a lot happens in the movie. There is a lot of dialogue, and I think a lot of the substance of the film is not so much in the event of the narrative. It's more in the different characters and the kind of the banter between them and the complex relationships that they all share. And so the events themselves become, I mean, they are important, obviously, but they're not necessarily as important as, compared to, other maybe espionage thrillers or even, action films. And that's what I loved about it, because, it just constantly keeps you engaged. I mean, the style of the film is interesting as well. It's a lot of it's set in these kind of indoor locations, in homes and places, the 2 central characters played by Fassbender and Cate Blanchett. A lot of the kind of the film's narrative takes place, at their kitchen table. But yeah, it's really interesting. But it's also, like I say, quite dark. And I was like, is there something wrong with the projection? And because it wouldn't be the first time that's happened, actually. But actually, no. That's clearly deliberate. But first of all, I found it a little bit annoying. But actually, as the narrative progressed, I found it quite alluring, and that also keeps the budget down. Although it's still budgeted at $50 million. Clearly, it's got a lot of star pedigree involved, and that's where the industry is. Even though this is a fairly small movie, but it still has to do pretty well for it to break even. But yeah, it's not very long either. It's really well paced. It's 90 minutes or so, isn't it? And so yeah, it's a breath of fresh air. It's highly recommended. A lot rides, a lot rests on the performances themselves. And Fassbender he's electric. I mean, he is fantastic.
Yeah. Cate Blanchett's not bad either.
I mean, that's what I mean. They're both. But the reason I mentioned, I want to make the connection here to Korean cinema. He's in Naung Jin's new film.
Okay.
So yeah, I'm very curious to see, how that turns out.
Sure. Those good points you mentioned, Darcy, about the dialogue and the banter and things like that. Is that perhaps one of the things that may make it struggle a bit more here in Korea because it doesn't translate as well? Is that perhaps why it's not doing so well here at the moment?
Yeah, I mean, movies like this do struggle to, I guess, in translation. It's tough to capture all of that. But, it's also just an era where if his film doesn't have anything that really makes it stand out, then, it's only people who are really kind of searching the release lists to see what's interesting. So, I mean, the movie debuted at number 20 in a slow week, which is not good. But, it's in theaters. People listening, if they think they would enjoy this type of film, I'd recommend going and find it.
Absolutely. I mean, I would also make reference to Tinker Tailor Soldier Spy, which is another. Actually, they often
same screenwriter, right?
Yes, I think so. Yeah, and it's a brilliant spy kind of drama. So if you're into that, we can check that out as well if you haven't. But yeah, it's interesting because this is obviously an American filmmaker who's made a British film.
So that was A Black Bag, out now in cinemas here in Korea. And that's where we wrap it up for Movie Spotlight. Jason, Darcy, thank you for your reviews, and we'll see you again next time. Take care.
Yeah, take care.
Thank you.